It was a cold evening in February. The streets of Ingleby Barwick, a quiet town in the north of England, were still. Shops had closed for the day, families gathered in their living rooms, unwinding from the week, and the usual hum of everyday life carried on as normal. At first glance, there was nothing remarkable about the night. A small group of friends walked down the street laughing, unaware that each step they took was bringing them closer to the worst moment of their lives. Further down the road, a van sat parked. The driver, Martin Breeze, a local man in his late 50s. He was a familiar face around town. To some, he was just another resident. But to those who knew him well, they'd say something about him had changed. As the group walked closer, the engine roared to life. In seconds, the van sped toward them with no intention of slowing down. There was no warning, no time to run, and in a single devastating moment, the peaceful quiet shattered. One man lay motionless on the ground. Others screamed in confusion and terror. The van, gone. The driver, disappeared. But why? Why would a father, a husband, and a neighbour suddenly become a killer? This is the story of Martin Breeze, and the devastating choice that changed everything. Welcome to True Crime Files, where we uncover real stories of crime, tragedy, and the choices that forever alter lives. If you're drawn to the details, like the people, the motives, and the moments that change everything, then you're exactly where you need to be. Make sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and stay with us as we bring you closer to the truth behind each case, because here, every story reveals more than just the crime. It reveals the unexpected paths that led there. On February 9th, 2024, the town of Ingleby Barwick, nestled in the heart of Teesside, was still recovering from the winter chill. Residents went about their usual routines, unaware that their peaceful community was about to become the centre of a devastating crime. That evening, 60-year-old Brian Darby joined a group of friends for a walk. It was supposed to be a simple outing, a chance to catch up and enjoy the quiet streets. But as they walked along the familiar roads, they noticed something unusual. A white van parked nearby. It wasn't moving, but the headlights remained on. What they didn't know was that behind the wheel sat Martin Breeze, a man with nothing but rage on his mind. He wasn't there by accident. He wasn't lost. He was waiting. At 57 years old, Martin Breeze wasn't the type of person anyone would expect to carry out a brutal attack. He had a family, a home, and a life built in the same community he was about to destroy. But inside that van, Martin had made a decision. Fueled by a dangerous combination of anger and drugs, he had one goal in mind: to teach a lesson. And he didn't care who got hurt in the process. As Brian and his friends approached, the van's engine roared to life. In an instant, the calm evening shattered. The van sped toward them at full force, leaving no time to react. Brian Darby never stood a chance. He was struck head-on and thrown to the ground. His friends, now in complete shock, screamed for help. The van didn't stop. It didn't slow down. It disappeared into the night, leaving a scene of chaos and devastation behind. By the time emergency services arrived, it was too late for Brian. He was pronounced dead at the scene. The rest of the group was left injured and traumatized, struggling to comprehend what had just happened. For the residents of Ingleby Barwick, life would never be the same. But what they didn't know yet was that this wasn't just a random act of violence. This was something far more personal. And the truth behind it would send shockwaves through the entire community. To understand what happened that night, we need to go back a few hours earlier. The day had started like any other for Sean Breeze, Martin's 19-year-old son. But as the hours passed, a minor altercation on the street would set off a chain of events that no one could have predicted. Sean had crossed paths with a group of men, the same men who would later be targeted in the hit and run. There was an argument. We don't know exactly what was said, but tensions escalated quickly. It wasn't just words being exchanged. Sean felt threatened, humiliated, and angry. He went home, frustrated and shaken. That's when he told his father, Martin, what had happened. And instead of calming his son down, Martin did the opposite. The two of them sat in their home, feeding off each other's emotions. Sean was upset, and Martin was furious. In his mind, his son had been disrespected, but instead of handling things rationally, Martin's thoughts spiraled into something darker. He wasn't going to let it slide. He grabbed the keys to the family van. Sean didn't try to stop him. In fact, he went along for the ride. Together, they set out with a plan. This wasn't about confrontation. It wasn't about finding a peaceful resolution. It was about making a point. The van became their weapon of choice. And when they spotted the group walking along the street that night, Martin didn't hesitate. He pressed his foot down on the accelerator, and in that moment, all sense of reason was gone. The attack wasn't just about revenge. It was about power. It was about sending a message. And in their minds, they had succeeded. But what they hadn't counted on was the speed with which the police would put the pieces together. As news of the hit and run spread through the community, the police wasted no time launching an investigation. Witnesses described the van, and it didn't take long for officers to trace it back to Martin Breeze. When they arrived at his home, Martin and Sean were both there. The van, damaged from the impact, was parked outside. Martin didn't try to run. He didn't deny what he had done, but his demeanour shocked investigators. There was no remorse, no regret. He was arrested on the spot, along with his son. As the case unfolded, more details came to light. During questioning, Martin admitted that he had been under the influence of drugs that night. He claimed he wasn't thinking clearly, but for the prosecution, that wasn't enough. This wasn't an accident, it wasn't a mistake. It was a deliberate act of violence, driven by rage and a desire for revenge. In court, the atmosphere was tense. Families of the victims filled the room, desperate for answers. Brian Darby's family described him as a kind, loving man who had no connection to the argument that started it all. He was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. Martin's defense team argued that he hadn't intended to kill anyone, that his actions were reckless but not premeditated. But the evidence told a different story. The judge listened as heartbreaking testimonies from the victims' families were read out. The impact of that night had left scars that would never fully heal. And through it all, Martin showed little emotion. Sean, too, remained silent. His role in the incident couldn't be ignored, but he was seen as being under his father's influence. The question on everyone's mind was, how did Doddick come to this? How could a father and son make such a devastating choice? In January 2025, the court delivered its verdict. Martin Breeze was found guilty of murder and 4 counts of attempted murder. His sentence, life in prison with a minimum of 32 years before he would be eligible for parole. Sean Breeze was convicted of manslaughter and 3 counts of causing grievous bodily harm. He received a 16-year sentence. For many, it felt like justice had been served, but for the families affected, no sentence could ever bring back what they had lost. Brian Darby's family spoke to the press outside the courthouse. Their words were filled with grief, but also a plea for change. We've lost a father, a grandfather, a friend, they said, all because of a senseless act of violence. For the community of Ingleby Barwick, the incident left a lasting mark. A town that once felt safe now carried the weight of a tragic memory. And for Martin and Sean Breeze, their choices had sealed their fate. In the end, this wasn't just a story about a crime. It was a story about decisions, consequences, and the devastating impact of unchecked anger. The question remains, could it all have been prevented? Or was it a tragedy waiting to happen? Only one thing is certain. One night, one van, and one moment of rage changed everything. What do you think drove Martin Breeze to make such a devastating choice? Was it a moment of madness or something building up over time? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We're always interested in hearing different perspectives on these complex cases. Do you think the sentencing was fair? Did justice truly serve its purpose here? If you agree with the outcome, hit that like button. And if you think there's more to the story, let us know why in the comments. And if you know someone who loves true crime stories, share this video with them. these conversations matter, and your voice could bring new insights to this case. Stay tuned, because there are always more stories to uncover, stories that remind us of the choices people make and the impact those choices leave behind.